Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Nina Ha, and I'm the director of the Asian Cultural Engagement Center. Today, I am really excited to do another InspirASIAN series and feature these wonderful, hopefully you can see them all, graduate students here, and I will have them introduce themselves because that's how I am. And I would also like to start with the land and labor acknowledgement from VT. So I'm going to start. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutelo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that legislation and practices like the Morrill Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands, both locally and in Western territories. We understand that honoring Native peoples without explicit material commitments falls short of our institutional responsibilities. Through sustained, transparent, and meaningful engagement with the Tutelo and Monacan peoples and other Native nations, we commit to changing the trajectory of Virginia Tech's history by increasing Indigenous staff, students, and faculty recruitment and retention, diversifying course offerings, and meeting the growing needs of all Virginia tribes and supporting their sovereignty. We must also acknowledge that enslaved Black people generated revenue and resources used to establish Virginia Tech and were prohibited from attending until 1953. Through inclusive VT, the institutional and individual commitment to UPROSM, we commit in the spirit of we commit to advancing a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. So now I am going to pass everything over to my graduate programming assistant.
Thank you. And so welcome everyone here at the ACE and on Zoom. Thank you so much for coming out here to support us graduate students and being a part of our experiences here. And again, I see a lot of familiar faces, people I know, people who keep coming back to the ACE. So thank you for continuing to support us. It's been wonderful. And so today we have the Graduate InspirASIAN series. So we do this we try to do this once a semester, if not once every academic year. It's about getting together a group of graduate students and for them to share their experiences with everyone here. And I know, so today, as always, we have like a wonderful panel of graduate students. And I'm just going to go around and get each one to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. We do have like a set of fixed questions, but let this be an open conversation. We want this to be more of a dialogue and discussion. And think of this as one of your group discussions that you have for your project groups or something like that. Feel free to walk up to us and talk to us about anything, and just feel free to ask us anything. We're just here. We're not experts, but we're here to share our experiences with you. And if that helps, then nothing like it. So
can you start with introducing yourself and your pronouns and
yes.
your department?
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
So yes. Do you want to start, Wesley?
Sure.
Yes.
Hey everyone, my name is Wesley. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a first year PhD student in the Department of Computer Science, where I'm working with Professor Shadi Hassan on computer networks and looking at rural connectivity and connectivity in the global south.
So I guess I go next. I'm Sharan Srinivasan. I'm a graduate student in industrial systems engineering. This is my fourth and last semester here. So I graduate in December, and I don't have a research background, but I'm going to be starting my career in supply chain consulting. So, and I'm also a graduate programming assistant here. So if you already didn't know. So.
Hi, everyone. I am Gia Ha, and I'm a second year graduate student as well, doing my master's in both sustainable land development as well as urban affairs and planning. And my background is in civil engineering. In addition to that, I also work as the graduate assistant for the Office of Sustainability. So overall, just interested in sustainability stuff.
Hi, I'm Teresa Wilson. I use she, her pronouns. I am a second year master's student in higher ed and student affairs. My GA is through the Student Success Center, and I work with first generation college students, which is population dear to my heart, being a first generation college student myself and first generation grad student. And so while I'm leaning more towards a professional life, I graduate in May. I still have strong research interests in APIDA student development, as well as looking at the use of animal-assisted therapy in higher education.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noor Tasneem. I am a second-year PhD student in the Translational Biology, Medicine, and Health program, which is based in Roanoke. And I actually am a graduate research assistant in the Embodied Brain Lab under Dr. Julia Basso, where I study the synchronization of brain activity during dance.
Yes, so, yep, we can actually start. So does anyone want to kick us off? There's a question.
I
You
can
wanna
start
go?
with the first one.
Go ahead. Starting is always.
Yeah, I'm happy to start because I came up with the question. And I'm really interested in learning
Yes,
everyone here.
absolutely.
But how did you get involved with the APIDA community at Virginia Tech or at your undergrad or even before that? And what advice do you have for other students hoping to get involved? I don't know if anyone else wants to kick it off first.
I feel like it was your question.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fair. So I guess if you ask the question, you can answer it.
Okay, fair.
So I got involved in undergrad. I was always super passionate about being involved with student organizations, but I actually really struggled with connecting with the APIDA community because my family is both Chinese and Vietnamese. So at home we'll speak Cantonese and Vietnamese, but I'm not the best at it. I'm not that close with my parents. They worked a lot growing up and I'm a first gen college student. So there were all of these like issues with like feeling APIDA enough or feeling like I didn't fit into that clique. So throughout undergrad, I got really involved with the first gen community on campus, as well as the Latino community, because we had so many similarities, but it was really hard for me to get that in with the Asian community because it felt like they were very insular in a way, because they were like, oh, if you don't do XYZ thing, or if you don't speak the language well, like you're not Asian enough. And I think a lot of people struggle with that as well. Like, what does it mean to be Asian? What does it mean to be Asian American and have all these different identities? And the way I actually got involved was I was sitting in a crowd. We had a comedian, Jenny Yang, come to campus, and she is a former labor organizer and obviously comedian now, but she was talking about how important it is to get involved in the APIDA community. And like, I was really moved by her. So at the moment, I was thinking about either becoming the president of First Gen Mason. I had already accepted that position. And then I was also thinking about becoming the vice president of my undergrad's Asian umbrella org called APAC, or Asian Pacific American Coalition. And I was going to say no to that one because I was like, oh, I don't know if this is what I want to do. But after Jenny Yang was like, you need to do it, I was like, all right, Jenny, it's going to happen. And just through that experience, I got to meet a lot more Asian students and really get more familiar with the history of Asian Americans and finding kind of my comfort zone in the APIDA community. And it's still something that I work with today. But my advice for people who want to get involved is just to show up, be an active member in certain organizations, and just be present and, volunteer for things. You don't have to do all the most, you can start as an intern or just start volunteering to help for certain events, like setting up the room or something. And then people see when you're active, I guess, and they'll like see the leadership potential in you. That's my answer.
That's wonderful.
Clap.
So I don't mind going next if it's okay. Preview. So I think when I saw this question, I think Gia first sent us this question. It just took me back to like a year and a half. I tried to think first how, like a year and a half back, I shouldn't even know what APIDA was. I'll be very honest. I didn't know what the term stood for. It was new to me because I didn't relate to it being an international student. It was different for me personally because I come from India, but I've not lived in India all my life. So I have traveled, like I've lived in different countries. So like for me, I saw like the entire community as one because I've lived in Southeast Asia, I've lived in the Middle East, and I've lived in India as well. So, and for extended periods of time. So for me, it was, I saw the entire community as one, having had that experience, but I know it wasn't the same for everyone out there, and everyone looked at it differently. Everyone had different experiences. So coming in here, like the ACE was like my first kind of outlook into the community as a whole. That's when I discovered what APIDA stood for, and I understood what it was that like made our community. We are a minority. Let's be honest. We are at a PWI, which is a predominantly white institute. We are in a small college town, which again restricts your access to the APIDA community. It could be through the form of food, it could be through the form of entertainment stores, people around you. And so for me, that was like my first tryst with the APIDA community, and that's when I discovered how strong this community is, because we always believe in collaboration, and that's what I learned here at the ACE about how strong that connection was. And also on the side, the other thing I kind of realized was, though we do consider ourselves as one community, we're each community within the APIDA community is so different. Like I know people from South Asia do things differently when compared to people from East Asia, Southeast Asia, West Asia. And somewhere I felt the connection because I had the opportunity to interact with all people from all these communities. But as I spoke to people, as I got to know more people, I understood people were having difficulties trying to break that barrier, and they were more comfortable being among members of their own community. So for me, I felt it was important through the role at the ACE to kind of try to link first us as a community before trying to reach the other people and people from like who are outside our community to understand what we are about. So that is what I've been working towards the past year. And like my advice for other students would be like similar to what Gia said: show up, because that goes a long way. Show that you care. Like you're all here today for the event. It shows that you all care and you all want to be part of the community. So that's a great first step. And just be the voice for the community. Again, I'm not trying to say that you need to go to protests or go to rallies or share every single social media post out there. It could even be as simple as spreading the message to your friend about, hey, there's something like this going on, and you want to go, or do you want to be a part of it? Stay aware about the things that happen in your community. It may be within the US, it may be outside the US, but try to the connect comes from the fact that you're interested in something, and you take that extra effort to kind of be informed about what's happening to people who are in your community. So I feel that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, hey, I'm Wesley, in case anyone just walked in or forgot my name. As I mentioned earlier, I'm just a first year PhD student, so I've only been here for maybe like 2 months, 2.5 months. So getting involved in the APIDA community is what I'm doing right now. But I guess I could kind of like draw upon my undergraduate experiences, talk about how I got involved with the equivalent there. So I guess originally I grew up in the Bay Area, California Bay Area, and I was very fortunate. I guess I didn't realize at the time, but there's like such a rich Asian American community. There's like so many immigrants who come to California and the Bay Area for work or for family, and I was really fortunate to grow up somewhere where there's a lot of really great Asian food, a lot of like relationships to be made with other Asian Americans. And it wasn't until I went to my undergraduate institution that I realized like what a privilege that was. And I think in like the first year or so, I kind of came to terms with find myself in a lot of like predominantly white spaces. As a student athlete, I guess specifically in the institution, there just weren't a lot of, people who look like me who competed in collegiate athletics. And so like kind of, through word of mouth, and some suggestions from my sister, I found myself in the Asian American Association at my school. And yeah, I feel like it was also, not only was it like this opportunity to reconnect with community, but it was also like the source of personal growth, where I realized that there's like this very like strong emotional experience that I was like missing by not being around, people who shared the same experiences or the same values as I did. And yeah, so I guess that kind of transitions into my advice for anyone hoping to get involved. Obviously there's like different levels of involvement in any sort of community that you're a member of, but I think it's important to just stay self-aware or mindful of like how you feel in different spaces, and use that to inform, like who you want to spend your time with and how much time you want to spend with those people. Yeah, sorry, a little shorter, but there's my take.
I'd love to add
Yes.
that Wesley is here on this panel because he showed up. You're a brand new student.
Yeah,
and
this
we
is like-
only met you like last
Yes.
month or something.
My second APIDA event.
But it's like, he came out to the event,
Yeah.
we were talking about the panel, and then Sean was like, hey, you want to be on a panel? And like, this is literally how it happened. And we were just, and like,
Yeah,
it's so important to just show up. So it's awesome to see like a first year student already getting involved in the community.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I would like to add to this is a topic that I'm particularly passionate about, because I originally started my Virginia Tech journey over in Roanoke, which is like where my program is based. So again, like 45 minutes, if you're lucky, on I-81, like away from the main campus, right? And I definitely felt like I was like there was like very little representation of, like the APIDA community, not only like within like the institution that's been built by Virginia Tech, like within the Roanoke campus, but also like within the greater city in general. And that was like very difficult for me, right? And I think the graduate student community itself can also serve as allies, like within the community as well. And obviously, like there's not that many graduate students in Roanoke either. So unfortunately, it was a very isolating experience when I first started off at Virginia Tech. But thankfully, Dr. Ha was coming in with, I think like maybe like once a month, where I like stick around like 4 times a semester to like do like check-ins with the graduate and professional students on the Roanoke campus. And that's when we had talked about like my possible involvements with the community. Unfortunately, given the long distance between me and the Blacksburg campus, I wasn't able to show up as much. But in addition to showing up, I think there's a lot of value in reaching out as well, right? And I think there are so many members of that community, of this community as well, that are like involved, like not only within Blacksburg, but also like within Roanoke, the greater DC area campuses as well. And so I know like many of us, I'm assuming, are based here within Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Southwest Virginia. But for those of us joining virtually, or for those of us who know of other students out in like these more like remote campuses, definitely encourage them to reach out, because I think there is what we've learned from the last few years during the pandemic, it's still a pandemic, is that, like that social connection can still be fostered, like even though like people have that physical distance between us, right? And especially if those individuals are within those remote campuses, there are still ways, such as even today, in which they can be involved within our community. And so I think that's something that I would like to add. And, like I think my experience too was a little bit drastic of a culture shock, because I moved to Roanoke from Tokyo. And so again, like obviously a very large APIDA community in Tokyo. Also, like my family's from Bangladesh. I would consider myself a Bangladeshi American. There's a large Bangladeshi population in Tokyo as well. And so I really felt at home there. And so again, so like that made that move to Roanoke very isolating and difficult for me. And I know I tell Dr. Ha this so much, but like I really just appreciated her, even like that one in-person meeting once a month of us just getting coffee, talking about like my unique experiences, definitely encouraged me to like come out. And I think even the picnic that Wesley first attended, I think that was my first formal APIDA event that I also attended in person too. And we're both on this panel. So yeah, show up and reach out for sure.
Awesome. I think like most, I have a little bit of a different experience because I'm an older graduate student. And so I still have parental pressures. Like I think my parents would always remind me, like, you need to give back to the community. Like you need to do something. Like you see all these issues that we're facing, like do something. Even though we have different ideological backgrounds, like get involved. So I still have like yes, even at 30 something, my parents still told me what to do. So, it was also not just for them, it was also because I have two sons. And so in I am in an interracial relationship. And so like my kids don't always get to see mommy represented in their lives, right? In the school that they're in and other facets of their life. So it's really important for them to see strong Asian role models in their lives, and to, you know, highlight that, right? Because that's their half, right? That's part of them. And so I want to do that. So I think that for me was more of a reason to do it. Also, in working with students, how important representation is. Like, if you see someone who looks like you, man, I can't tell you the number of conversations that I've had with students who are like, you get it. You understand, like, we don't have to talk, like, there's an eye look and you're like, mhm. Right? You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to say, we're like, yep, gotcha, right? And so for those reasons, like I wanted to get involved and like wanted to be a participant in the APIDA community here at Virginia Tech. Selfishly, it's also part of, you know, my graduate school requirements is to have service. Let's be real, I gotta double dip where I can check. But I think really importantly for me, and I've had conversations with Dr. Ha, she's been amazing for me, was like developing my own racial salience. Like growing up, like I grew up in Southern California, so like all Asian around. But when I was younger, my parents were refugee boat people. And so, you know, we came here and like, you know, there was still a lot of hostilities against Vietnamese people. There was, even though my dad fought for the South. And so like we were on the same side kind of, you know, and like not seeing a lot of folks who looked like me. So as I got older, I mean, obviously there was more and more immigration came to the US. And so lots more of that kind of happening. But that idea of like, there's student development theory called self-authorship, and you write your own story. That's, you know, TLDR on that one. And so I'm still writing my own story. And so everyone here is still writing their own story. And so I feel like part of that story is our identity. What does our identity really tell us? Which is why I'm so like passionate about like student development theory, because if we understand like how we can make sense of our identity, man, it'll be a great world, you know, that we live in. And we're all so amazing and so awesome. And we need to appreciate that. As far as the second question, what advice do I have about this? Show up. Walk in. Like I literally walked in. I said, hey, Dr. Ha, you have a minute? And she's like, hey, well, you would come on in. And we're talking like, hey, guess what? I'm this blah, blah, you know, just kind of like, you know, that spiel of like, here are my pronouns is what I do. Da, da, da. And then she's like, awesome, let's do some work together. And I was like, sure, awesome. And then like we started working together, and like I said, like it's hard because I'm away from home and I miss my family. So she's kind of been, I don't know why I'm crying. But she's been like that person who I can just be like, yeah, like this is how it goes down. And it's awesome. And so I'm glad that there's centers like this, because frankly, everyone has that moment in their life where they're just like, I just need somewhere where I feel like I'm not like just that one person. And there's other people who are around here who are like me. So anyway, that's mine.
We're all crying now. Nodded.
Okay, well, since we'll just move on to the next question. So the next question is, how do or have implications of the bamboo ceiling, anti-Asian hate, and generic identity-based stereotypes on the community impacted your career? It has in a way, because I do study higher ed and student affairs. So the model minority myth, right? Some folks lean into it and some folks don't lean into it, but I see it a lot, specifically like you're Asian, so you must be really good at math. And I was like, no, breaks. Like I do have a STEM degree, but not that great at it. My husband's a mathematician, so I'll just let him do that. But I will say, like, we get pigeonholed a lot. I've been reading a lot of research. I think a lot of Asian students feel like they have to go into STEM. But I feel like we should be represented in all different fields. We should be pursuing whatever field that makes us happy. If it's STEM, fantastic. If it's history, super awesome. And so that sort of thing of going into the arts. And they Sharon also alluded to this, like looking at a PETA community as a monolith, right? Oh man, the rich diversity that lies within the APIDA community is so huge, right? The way East Asians are navigate their identity versus Southeast Asians versus South Asians versus West Asians, like everyone's got their own set of things happening, and there's no one theory to rule them all. For the Lord of the Rings. So I think that we need to start with like disaggregating data so we can really help those who the PETA community well, right? So those are kind of a long story. I get very passionate about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is something I've struggled with as well as someone, like who's doing a PhD within STEM. And being of like South Asian origin too, and as I mentioned too, like being Bangladeshi American. What I've struggled with particularly is I think so. I'm assuming like most of us here are graduate students, but I mean this is like a graduate student panel, and like the further I've gone on, like I did my undergrad, took a few years off, like have professional experience, went to graduate school. And so ideally like those childhood experiences that I had as like a first generation, like college student, low income, like first generation American, I do feel like I'm getting like, in a way, like unfortunately, like a little bit distant from that based on like, the personal achievements I've been able to do based like being away from home at my undergraduate institution, being away from home in my professional life, and now being away from home and being a graduate student. And so when people typically interact with me, it's just like, oh, okay, like great, like you are like the successful South Asian student within STEM. And FYI, like I went to Duke University for undergrad, right? And so like I also like carried that. There is somewhat of a weight on that, right? Because people look at me, they're like, oh, you went to Duke, all right, cool. Like your parents were probably very successful, right? I don't think that institution also has like the best reputation either. So for other reasons as well. And, so like people like have like that automatic like impression of like that model minority and be like, okay, like you've probably had a lot of it, like your path like set up for you, right? Like they don't know that like I've like worked my butt off at like my mom and dad's convenience store like every single weekend in high school, and then eventually got like a full ride scholarship to Duke, which many people think was merit based. It was like no, like it was financial aid, like it was need based, right? And so I think just like a lot, what's really helped me over the past few years, especially like since I've like like gotten separated from that time of like living with my parents back in Tampa Bay, Florida, to now, is being able to just like being able to reflect on those experiences and having those conversations. And I have the luxury of having, like a healthy relationship with like my family back home, right? And I realize not everyone has that. By being able to like interact with like that community back home, right? Like the Bangladeshi American community, the Bangladeshi community, and my family back home, and realizing, like what experiences made me the way that I am today, and kind of like build that sense of resiliency. And like being able to have these conversations too with a lot of the peers I'm interacting with within Virginia Tech as well, because I realize that those experiences are also very unique, and important to check back on, regardless of like how long ago I had those experiences. But it's something that I like continuously need to like check myself on, because I do realize like many of us, especially like during the peak of the semester right now, right? It's just like, all right, like I'm just trying to like take day by day, right? And just like finding, I've realized like I need to like practice like more grounding exercises on like a daily basis, and finding like what uniquely helps me like ground myself. and thinking about like, all right, like why am I experiencing the things that I'm experiencing on a daily basis? And a lot of that is related to, like being a member of the APIDA community at a PWI here in Southwest Virginia. Yes.
Can you also talk about your dance?
Oh, yeah. What about it?
You're at a STEM, but you're also a dancer.
Yeah. So I guess, I also mentioned, so I briefly mentioned that I study the human brain with mobile brain imaging during dance. So I actually left my dance career to pursue a PhD as well. So I was in Tokyo, doing like dance gigs and whatnot, performing at dance studios. Was also in Seoul too, worked with like choreographers for like BTS, Blackpink, all the fun stuff if people are into K-pop. I don't know if anyone is. But so it's like also just like trying to like find that intersection between the arts and STEM. But we're talking about APIDA experiences as well. I can have like a whole other conversation about the representation of arts within the tech institution, but I think that could be a completely separate panel as well. But yes, that's also a very important part of my identity. I'm also a dancer.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I can transition into what I think. So, I just want to mention a little bit about what the bamboo ceiling is for people who are not aware about it. So, the bamboo ceiling is actually a term that was coined by Jane Huon in one of her books. This was way back in 2005. So it spoke about how members of the APIDA community faced obstacles within their organizations or institutions with respect to it could be with respect to their identity, it could be with respect to their intellectual level, and many factors that contributed to them not being able to get the opportunities that they deserve in the organization or institution that they were a part of. So that's just what bamboo ceiling is all about. And so for me, I obviously have the tag of an international student attached to myself and to my profile. And obviously, like a lot of others out here, immigration is a huge issue. So we all are always under the pressure of only staying for a limited time in this country and only having limited opportunities because of the fact that we're not American. We may have the same level of talent and skill as anyone else out there, but we are limited in the fact that we are not American. So we just do not have the luxury of saying that, hey, I want to take a break. So I probably don't want to do, I probably want to take a semester off and not do my courses and just sit at home. But you just don't have the luxury to do that because you're expected to not, be not do anything for more than 60 days, which does suck. But a lot of us have faced that situation before, and that is tough to be under that constant pressure. And it's kind of like the monkey on your back that always keeps tagging along until you get rid of that tag. So and also a lot of subtle things that I've faced. For example, I've had someone in an interview once asked, when I was interviewing for a company, I've had someone ask me that, tell me that, oh, you're from India, but you speak really good English. So I had to justify to that person that I grew up all my life speaking English. And this is not, it's not like I've learned English just in my time here. I speak English at home. I've grown up all my life learning English. So English is the first language in my country. So I had to justify that, I also belong, which is sad. And I'm sure a lot of us in our community also probably have faced the same thing. So this is something we, again, I'm not saying that we're resigned to this. Things are getting better, things are improving, but it still exists. And which is why we as a community do exist, and we do all these things just, to try to break away from what we faced all over the years. And if there's a little bit of change that we can implement, it's through things like this. So glad to be a part of this, by the way.
You want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I guess I kind of speak to, some subsection of Nora's experiences. Also being in STEM and especially being in the field of computer science, which I feel like is a very very popular field for like, a lot of like East Asian communities. Yeah, I think in terms of my career, like looking back, like I found computer science, in college. I didn't really have a ton of experience of it in high school. And I felt like these conflicting pressures of like, yeah, I think like intellectually this is a really, really cool pursuit, but there's like the stereotypes of the type of people who work in there, and that played into, one, is this a career I could see myself in, which is the answer is yes. And then two, is this a career that I would like do I want to be reinforcing the stereotype? And I feel like that, brought a lot of inner turmoil. And I feel like at that point in my life, I didn't quite realize that, everything that you do as an Asian American is like perpetuating, this Asian American stereotype, right? We have this ability to break out of, this monolith and create a plurality of Asian American experience. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, that spoke to me a lot. I think deciding to come to graduate school again, like this was something I decided maybe like a year and a little bit ago, like, and it's funny, like talking to people and they're like, oh yeah, like your parents must be like so proud of you, like going to a graduate school. And I was like, yeah, like, I don't know. I didn't really see it as like that kind of, coercion or kind of like system where like this was always something I was going to do. Like it was like this journey of exploration of like, the different, sectors that you can spend your time working in. And this was like the one that was the most appealing to me. And it's like, again, I think there's all this plurality that's kind of tied up inside of like the external perception of like, okay, like you're an Asian American going to graduate school for computer science. But yeah, maybe that wasn't too clear, but that was a nice dumping of my thoughts on everyone. Yeah. And I think something I've also like explored within this idea of plurality and monoliths, and I think maybe this relates to the bamboo ceiling in terms of people's perceptions of you and what you can achieve. Something I didn't really like explore until later on was my identity as a Malaysian American. So like ethnically, my parents are Chinese, and so like I appear Chinese, and then like growing up in high school and even throughout like large portions of my college experience, I was like identifying as like a Chinese American, and then it wasn't until like this kind of, I don't know, this opportunity to just take a step back and like think about, like what do I value, like why do I have some hesitancy in going to these careers, like, and that I think that was like an opportunity to kind of deconstruct what it means to be, Asian American overall, and that was kind of how I arrived at this idea of, everything that we do, kind of, is part of this like race making process or racialization of this community. And yeah, I think that was like, it was like this big revelation for me. I was like, yeah, I'm not just Chinese American, I'm like Malaysian American. And then I realized I think everyone has the opportunity to kind of like uncover, what is our personal history, and in what ways do these histories like play into, some sort of stereotypes, and what ways do they like conflict or confront, some of these stereotypes. Yeah, hopefully that wasn't too much of but ideological exploration.
Good stuff. I really liked what you talked about with like the double consciousness kind of. And I think that's not something that is only in the APIDA community, because like the idea of double consciousness is something that W.E.B. Du Bois talks about, right? And like one of the things I always have to think about the way I show up, like I hate driving, and anytime I'm driving, I'm like, I'm not that great a driver, but I'm like always conscious of like people are gonna think I'm a bad driver because I'm Asian and because I'm female. But like I just hate driving, so I'm not on the road a lot, right? But like in terms of the bamboo ceiling, I think of a very specific instance. Just this summer, I went to a conference, the American Waterworks Association, and the former president was up on the stage. His name is Chiho Sham. He's an immigrant from Hong Kong. And that was my first time seeing somebody who looked like me on a stage in charge of an organization that has a national and international like audience. And I remember sitting in the crowd crying because I was like, oh my God, like this man looks like me. I could be the president of an organization. Not that I want to be, but like we have these mental blocks on ourselves if we don't like you can't be what you can't see. And even though I've heard that so many times in different panels and like have heard other people talk about it, like I lived through it in that moment. I was like, oh my God, I could be the president, you know? And I think that's so important. One of the things that I also struggle with being not only Asian, but being female is people constantly underestimating me. And so I went up to him after his talk. I reached out and I said, hello, like you mean a lot to me. I love that you're here and like you're inspiring me. So he invited me to like a thing later, and I'm standing next to him at this after party. And somebody asked me, oh, is this your daughter? But they never would have said that if we were both white or if I was a man, like all these things, right? They're like, oh, is that your daughter? Is this why she's here? I know that like I look young. So that's something that I'm like subconscious about. And I was next to another guy too, who's like 38 or something, but he has a baby face, also Asian. And they're like, is that your son? And like, so we go through these experiences where people just underestimate us. Like I have experience in the engineering field, you know, and like I went to that conference because I got a scholarship, but still somebody just like, they had this mentality that I was like just there because like, you know, the Asian people, yeah, the Asian people don't belong in these spaces. So I think to me, I'm really passionate about leadership and trying to show people that Asian people have the potential to be leaders. And I think we all have the potential to be leaders. We just have to find these role models or reach out to people in the community like Dr. Nina Ha, who can like connect us and stuff. And I think that's really important.
I think I want to go off of what Gia had to say, because we are both at the intersection of race and sex, right? And gender, right? And so the pressures that we feel as women, as especially Asian women, that you need to be submissive and quiet. And I was like, I bucked that trend like a long time ago. And so, yeah, I can be loud, but my silence is also worth something too, right? And so I wholehearily agree that, but I do lean into the looking younger, like stereotype, because like for real. I mean, people pay a lot of money. But yeah, I get that. I get that. And it's funny because I don't know about you, Gia, but like I grew up being underestimated by my own parents, right? Like I have two brothers, and they're like, well, your brothers are going to do well. You're teaching you these things so you can get a good husband and get married. Like that's your job in life. And I was like, okay. Yeah, I was the first one to graduate from college. I'm the only one to go to graduate school, and I was the first one to get married. So I like did all the things. And so I think, and my parents now come to me like, what legal advice, like, should we do on this, or what should we do on that? How should we invest this and that? And they're not going to my brothers. And so it's like, you know, there's that, right? And so, yeah, I feel that too. Like when you were, I was like, oh my gosh, we could go on a whole therapy session about this. But yeah, that intersectionality that we experience as Asian women, like that is something that's really important that we face a little bit differently. So yeah. Sorry,
No,
and those good stuff on that. So.
Do more, or do you want to ask questions? Because we have like over 10 minutes. So
let's see, what was the other question? We can, I guess, read the third question out loud. If somebody has a burning question and
Yes.
they think it's better than the third question, jump in.
Yeah. So, okay, so I can ask the third question. So, it's like essentially I'm sure all of you here are graduate, undergraduate students, who have, a lot of doubts about a lot of things. There's obviously, you can pursue academia, you can pursue a corporate career somewhere in the industry or whatever. But so is there any way we can help you with respect to, the path that you want to take? And that is what we would like to answer. But if anyone does have any other specific questions that you would like to ask the five of us, just please feel free to raise your hands, and people on Zoom as well, just feel free to unmute and just ask your questions or just type it in the chat box. But yeah, we're just leaving the floor open to all of you. If not, then we will continue talking about this, but
Can I ask one?
sure.
Okay. I think for me is like, you were talking about belonging. And reaching out, but how have you all sort of figured out how to find community for yourselves? Both like, like personally, but also academically and professionally. I think there's one of those three vectors.
Guess I can jump in professionally, which I usually hate to talk about, but I actually feel kind of strongly about. Yeah, I think I would have had no idea what to do without like any external help. And it was actually through like going to the career office at my like undergraduate institution that I met someone who had like, you know, seen a lot of similar students because she had worked this job for long periods of time. And she really helped me explore, you know, I think it's always like a fine line between, you know, telling someone, you know, other people feel the exact same way, and telling someone like, oh yeah, your feelings are unique and valid. But she really helped me explore like, or like understand that, you know, this, I don't know, all these career crises that I was having were things that a lot of, you know, students at my institution also experienced, and helped me navigate, you know, the different communities, or, you know, like leaned on her experience to kind of share where I might like, you know, find some sort of community. So I guess that was a big thing for me professionally, was like finding someone who had like really like, you know, good informed advice on where I might be like looking, you know, where I could kind of find the intersection of the things I like and the things I value and care about. Not that I don't like things that I care about.
So I think for me, like, in a sense, in my field, I think not everyone has the same like advantage, I guess, or I don't know what's the right word to use, but are not as fortunate enough, because I do have a lot of people that look like me in what I do, whether it be in classes or even in the field that I'm looking to get into. So that always makes me kind of feel like I belong, and I'm not a part of something that I'm an outsider of. So again, I know that not everyone has the same privilege. There are a lot of fields out here that do not get enough representation. Not just our community, it can be people from other communities as well. It can be the Latinx community, LGBTQ+, the Black community. So I think I'm fortunate because I do have people who look like me and who understand where I come from and what are the difficulties that I would face in my professional life. So for which I'm extremely fortunate, and I couldn't be more grateful. And with respect to my personal, like my personal connection with community, what I do here at the ACE, again, Dr. Nina has been like I think everyone here mentioned, and I want to add as well, that she's like been my biggest pillar of support, and she like here at Virginia Tech, and I couldn't have honestly done, and I think my experience would have been very different if it wasn't for her and the ACE. I learned a lot, I grew a lot. I could see it, like I literally my parents over video call could sense that there was something different about me the past year. So I guess I got the validation, and like that gave me a lot. I learned a lot about community, and though I've always been the kind of person who wants to stay connected, I learned a lot more about other communities as well, and not just the South Asian community, and for which I'm always grateful to you, Dr. Neha. And also, like, for me personally, like my parents have always been like so supportive in what I do, and I know like you know, I'm thousands of miles away from them. I've left them far behind. I've left like friends and family far behind. But for me, I always do try and make it a point to connect with them, and you know, just let them know that, hey, you know, how, like, just a simple like text like, hey, how are you doing? Like probably once in a few months. I didn't realize it made such a huge difference until I had someone one of my family members come up to me and tell me that, that's such a wonderful gesture. And I'm so happy whenever I read or see your message. So I just realized that small things like that can, go a long way in, brightening someone else's life up. So and I want to keep doing that. And it just makes me makes me think that the other person feels they're important, because it's we had this session about gratitude yesterday. I feel like I'm just going off whatever I said yesterday, things sad and Dr. Nina over here, so they knew. But yeah, so it's so important to make people feel that they're wanted, and to make them feel like they belong, and more so people from our own community. And yeah, that's what I have.
I love it.
Like there's a chat or a question on the chat. Maybe they could give them a chance to.
Let's see. Okay, how do I? Okay, my computer's massive.
Oh,
I can just ask it if that's easier. Is that easier for me to ask it?
Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, but my volume. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thanks. Well, so first, I'd just like to say how much I really appreciated hearing from you all. It was really, really interesting and important to hear your perspective. So thank you all so much for being on the panel today. And so my question is about a topic that Dr. Welfare and Dr. Melchior, who was a graduate student here years ago and is now works in education psychology, but they talked about the issue of broaching, and so they were in a mixed race relationship. So Dr. Welfare is white and Dr. Melchior, when she was a graduate student here, is Black, and they talked about this idea of broaching, of how do you have those conversations, right? That if you want to make sure that people are comfortable addressing issues of race in your, oh, have I disappeared? Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, good, thanks. So about, that is often uncomfortable, like people don't know how to bring up the issue of race. People feel like, oh, I don't want the student to feel stigmatized, or that's the only thing that I notice about them, or like, I'm not sure I even want to start this conversation because what do I know about it? But they did a really powerful presentation about how the idea of just, the person in power, right, the faculty member, to open that conversation makes a huge difference and just allows space for people to address concerns, let them know that the advisor is, acknowledges that there is a different experience to be at a primarily white institution when you're a person of color, and that is open to hearing about concerns and trying to help navigate them. And so I was curious what you all thought about that idea, and whether you have had any experiences with, I don't know what the racial relationships are of your supervisors, but whether you've had any experiences and whether they did broach the topic, and whether you felt that was helpful or awkward. And if they didn't, whether you wish they would or not. So sorry, very long question.
Can you hear us, Dr. Haas? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
My current GA supervisor is Black, and we haven't had that conversation yet. It hasn't really come up as an issue, really. I think I'm in a little bit of a different position, right? Because I am an older graduate student. I'm more centered in myself, and I feel more confident in myself. So if I need to talk about it, I feel like I'm empowered to do so, because I understand that. I think sometimes younger graduate students don't feel that they can do that. So I'm in a unique kind of, just to like center my positionality on this. I also think that, but when I do work with students, right, there is a power differential in that, right, where I'm the advisor when they're the student. I always center myself. I use myself as an example. And sometimes when I center myself as an example of, hey, this is a time where I haven't felt comfortable, then students will start to share. Because I think when we become vulnerable, it's the vulnerability that we're asking from our students, that we must be ourselves first in order to ask it and to receive it from them, right? I'm taking a class on social justice right now, social justice education, and we talk about really heavy topics. And sometimes we talk about vulnerability a lot in how we work with students who are coming from different marginalized groups. And so the important thing that I've gathered from conversations with other graduate students is that vulnerability is key, and an openness and willingness and a humbleness to understand that we don't know everything and that we're there to learn and continue to learn. And if we make that honest effort to show that, I think students will open up and we can have these honest conversations that they're talking about. So I think, the key word, I think, in answering your question, Dr. Oz, is vulnerability.
I love that. It makes me, so Teresa and I were talking about this a little bit, but both of us are in mixed race relationships. And so our partners are come from culturally different places than us. My partner's Black, her partner's white. And like, as somebody who's in this type of relationship, you kind of are broaching when you're going to certain family functions and you're the only Asian person, or you're in a certain space and you're the only, you're representing XYZ. And I found that it's been really helpful to just focus more on the similarities. Like in undergrad, that's how I met my partner. We were both first generation college students, and that's how I was able to connect with so many other people who weren't just Asian, but throughout the community. And I really like that piece you said about vulnerability. And I think it actually really ties so well with the first question about like, how can Dr. Nina's question about how can you, connect and find that sense of belonging. I think by recognizing that there's so many people in the community who can help you get to where you need to be, and you're not alone, and being open with where you need help and making that ask is something that's really important. And then just being a really good listener. You have to understand where a community is coming from or what their interests or values are before you try to just like suggest things or come in and like disrupt things. I think I can do this better because whatever. So you have to just be a listener.
It's funny because you're talking about like that. It's like my son mentioned to my husband, and he took this more offensive. He's like, kids don't think you're my dad because I don't know. Oh, they don't leave mom as mom because I don't look Asian enough. Right. And so my husband I was like, what else? And like my husband took really large offense to it. Like, wow, how can that really happen? Like, what is going on? And I think, I go, look, you gotta read the room, right? We live in Blacksburg, predominantly white. There is a lot. I didn't want to live anywhere else outside of Blacksburg because, at least it's fairly diverse because of the university. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like it's even weirder. Like it's good. For us it's hard, but I think mixed race kids have it a little bit more difficult because they're navigating two different. So
Yeah, so we just want to be a little cognizant of time. So I guess we're just a little past 1 here, but I just want to thank everyone for coming out here. Folks on Zoom, thank you so much for joining us and just supporting us graduate students. We really appreciate all the questions and please, everyone here at the center, please feel free to stay back for a few minutes. You can talk to us, chat up if you want. And, but otherwise hope you all have a great rest of your day and week. So.
Thank you everyone for coming.
I'm gonna stop recording.